We live?
Yep.
Yes.
Hey, just congratulations, everybody. This is the last official meeting of the Bi-State Working Group. And so we're gonna have a short status meeting today on progress that's been made thus far. But then we're gonna have a little recognition of what is accomplished during the Bi-State Working Group, and then we're gonna get into the new organization, some things that we need to do, you know, to get that set up. So, Mike, if you will, go ahead and take over.
All right, so as Commissioner said, that we're going to modify the agenda just a little bit. We're going to go through just our normal catch up items on what's going on, and then the bridge authority stuff, we're going to move to 3:00. We've got a couple people who are going to call in at 3, and then we want to go through a whole list of items related to that. So on the general items, we did get an update from ODOT on the biological opinion. They have been working with NIMS. They are combining the bigger sections. NIMS wanted that as one big package or larger packages. So those will be submitted in early July to NIMS. And then the remaining packages will be submitted to NIMS at the end of July, and then they will go through August just responding to any comments that NIMS has. And they still think they're on schedule to be able to finish this up in September. So that's what we're still hearing from them, is it's still looking like the biological opinion piece will be completed in September. So that doesn't mean the rod is coming. That just means the biological opinion. On the rod piece, there is still the section 106 that has to be completed, and that is currently needs to get a step done with Yakima Nation and the Historic Preservation Societies in Washington and Oregon. We're waiting on Yakima right now to get back to us. They are having some internal discussions on how to approach the section 106 and the treaty fishing MOAs internally. And the last conversation I had with Marcus, their legal counsel, was it would be about 30 days. That was about 15 days ago before they would be able to move forward. So sometime early July, I will reach back out to Marcus and see where they are. But there's a domino effect with section 106. We have to have that piece before the next steps can be done. So that is the critical path right now, is getting Yakima an agreement with that on the section 106 stuff. So we'll keep you updated on that. GR updates, good news last week from Oregon. It looks like they did close out their session. We got 20 million from Oregon. I'm waiting on the final details. The bills that it was in, if nothing changed over the weekend, was House Bill 5030 and Senate Bill 5506. One acknowledged the need, and the other one identified the bonding source for the money. So what I've been told, though, is that those funds, don't count on those funds being available until very late 24, potentially even into 25, based on how ODOT or Oregon will do those fundings. So more to come, kind of when those fundings will become available.
We may have to try and push Oregon a little bit more to get those funds advanced and released.
We should have some conversations with them going through the end of this year, as they start to figure that out, of what the process is, and if there's any opportunity to advance that funding. We should have those conversations. We should still be okay based on the Washington funding and our existing funding. But we just want to make sure we watch that, because we will be running up against the end of our funds towards 2025. So, or at least, yeah.
And the next opportunity to ask Oregon for funding is going to be in 2025.
25, yes. Yeah, so this is 2023 biennium money. It just won't come available until late in the biennium. And then the next big session and all the discussions is they're setting up for a big transportation package in Oregon to do that in 2025. So we want to make sure over the next 2 years that we put to use as much of the money as we possibly can, get as much as we can to be ready, so that we can show that we're ready for that next set of funding that comes in.
I'm not used to funds being available at different times in a biennium. Do you know what the mechanism is that would result in that?
What do you
Is there
mean?
any language they had associated with why we should expect it to be late in the biennium?
I don't have the details on that. That came from our lobbyist, was to not anticipate that funding to be available until late, and I think it was the source, and I don't know if they have identified the complete source of where the bonds are gonna be. I've heard it may be lottery. But if it ends up being something else, I think that piece is not completely done,
Jeff,
and then that's
Jeff
why.
said this morning it was a lottery.
Okay, and I've heard lottery, I just have not gotten a confirmation 100% that that's where they're coming from. So, and it was more of when they
The
was.
sale of bonds might not
The
happen. till later.
sale of
Yeah.
bonds was the reason, and they didn't want to do it too early and sit on the interest, so that was why they may do a late bond sale.
Right.
Before we see the money.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So DC, raise grant, everybody heard, maybe everybody heard, we got 3.6 million in a raise grant. That's really geared towards going to bike peds to set us up for bigger, grant ask once we get an action plan and kind of develop some, preliminary plans and process for what we're gonna do with the bike, connections to the bridge. So once we have that, then I think that'll set us up nicely. The SS4A, for example, has an implementation grant that can be up to 25 million. And then Raise has opportunities for additional money in that $25 million range that we would look to ask for probably a year from now or 2 years from now for bike beds.
So there was a little confusion. The language you use, you talk about connections to the bridge, but the specific grant was for engineering and planning of the facilities on the bridge.
It's connections, well, it's kind of all one. It's the connection of the
Some of the type.
facilities on the bridge and how they will connect to the community areas on each side.
Because that's what I thought we had talked about,
Yeah.
but the language in the specific title almost seemed to exclude that. So could you
We'll double
forward me a
check that.
copy of the, just forward me a copy of
Okay.
the request?
I read it too, and
Yeah.
it was
Was it?
a little
Both sides?
nebulous of
The,
what I thought it was gonna be. I read it that we could use it to build the bridge itself and the bike pedestrian. It didn't commit us that it has to be only the connection pieces onto it.
I read it almost the opposite. I read it, it was exclusively the pieces on the bridge that it excluded the connections, but I thought when I read the draft that we had submitted, I thought it was focusing on the other end. So both are important, but I just want to read it and understand what we're actually.
we tried to leave it vague so that we could define kind of where could best use that to best position us for bigger grants. So we
Right.
tried not to be overly specific on purpose with some of that. Because it does, you tie yourself in and then you can only. do
No, I
certain
understand. I
things
just
with
want to
it,
see
so
what they,
Yeah,
what
we'll-
they tell us.
We'll forward that.
What are the strings?
Okay,
Yeah, one of the concerns that I have and maybe share with the board. Is that I personally don't want us to spend so much time thinking about the connections and we lose the momentum on the bridge.
so
The bridge ought to be priority number one. The connections can be a separate project, but should not take away from the bridge.
We have cities that can take the lead on the other piece, but the question is there funding available for the consultancies that are gonna be necessary to do that right? Right,
Yeah,
I don't think that the Bridge Authority isn't going to be building pathway in City of Hood River or the City of Bingen or City of White Salmon.
So
But
should the
they can
bridge
help.
authority even have this $3.6 million?
But that's what I want to read it, because I want to see what is this for?
and yeah, our intent was if we end up doing it was to bring in a separate planning team to help
Right.
lead that planning effort.
Right.
And get everybody coordinated around a coordinated bike ped plan for the region.
Right.
That was what we were intending to do with that and make sure we've checked the box of an action plan. That's required for the SS4A. In order to be able to set us up for the bigger grants later.
Yeah, I mean, that's precisely what I remembered the application was
Yeah.
for, the text in the grant, it didn't read that way to me, so I want to
Okay.
clarify.
All right.
Yeah, I thought our intent was
Yeah,
not the bridge, but the connection.
I got it, but that's not what I read.
That was really all for funding, no other major changes. The MPDG, we are here and that now that the raise grant, that's what they were waiting on was to do the raise grant awards, that should be coming out any day. We'll see. We've heard multiple things over the last few months of when that's coming out. The multimodal, discretionary grants, which is your infra grant, your rural grant, and your mega grant. Which will be $200 million asks. And then after those three will be the bridge investment program, which will be another potentially 200 million ask from that program as well.
But we're going after all four of them.
We're going after all four of them, yes, individually. And then they said, yes, apply. What we heard from Washington was apply for all of them. They will figure out how they fund us between them. And we may,
Give us too much.
yeah, I don't think they'll give us too much.
We told them we promised we'll give it back.
And we don't be surprised, and in even in our applications, we are writing them up that we would be okay with multi-year funding. Because they are looking to do that on projects. So that was one discussion we had with them, was us being multi-year funded. So. Treaty MOAs, Yakima, we talked about Nez Perce. They have a meeting, it's either today or tomorrow, where we should get approval to use their logo. So that'll be the third one that we have, and then Warm Springs is working through their system to give us approval to use their logo also. And we'll get a letter of support with that from Nez Perce. We should get that this week from Amanda. She is also taking the MOA through the Nez Perce tribe to the different committees in order to advance the MOA and get their input into the MOA. So we're expecting to hear something from them with the MOA, you know, as soon as they can get it through their tribal stuff. So
Could you gently press each one of them for a date on when we're gonna see the next round of drafts of the MOA?
Yep.
The use of their logos is fine, but the meat and potatoes is that MOA.
And we've been doing that. So I have emailed Amanda just about every week, checking in with her. She's working on it. So I'll just keep checking in with her weekly or every other week to just see
If
where
she'd
she
like
is.
for
and
us
who
to
she's
go out
met
there and
with.
have a sit down and.
Yep.
We're fine with that.
Yeah, we continually offer to meet with them. I've got emails in to Joe Pitts right now. They were looking at calendar dates for us, and that was with Umatilla. So I'm just waiting on him to get back to me with the dates, but I
Yeah,
emailed
because
him.
it's been a couple months since we've
Yeah.
been to Umatilla. It's probably time to
Yep.
go knock on.
So I emailed him 2 weeks ago and he said they were coordinating dates. I emailed him last week. They hadn't had the dates yet, so I'll continually just check with him and see when they're available and when we can get in to meet them.
Okay.
Warm Springs, Lonnie was able to have a conversation with Warm Springs. They are looking at the MOA and we are pushing them to see when we can get another date scheduled with Umatilla or Warm Springs also. So we'll continue to just keep asking.
But the key one is Yakima.
Yakima's the
For
key
the
one.
106 plus the MOA.
Yeah.
Is there anything more we could do with the Yakima?
Right now, no. I mean, Marcus basically told us, hold off, let him figure out what the internally, politically, what they're figuring out. And then he will get back to us. So we'll check in with him, but I don't think there's anything we can do right now to move that any quicker than they're gonna move it.
Okay.
We continue to work on the RFP, geotech investigations, that will start July 10th on the Oregon side for the in-water. Based on how that goes, we may have to adjust the time of day for the Washington work to avoid the fish season. So we're monitoring what the local fish season is and when it'll end. It just depends on the run numbers as to when they'll end those seasons. It could be as early as mid-July, it could be as late as late July. And then the next season kind of depends also on the fish runs and when they show up to when it'll start. So we're trying to squeeze in. If they conflict too much, we may end up having to skip some of the Washington borings. But we do already have existing stuff within the channel. So we won't have to do with anything within the channel where they do a lot of their gill net fishing. So we're hoping we can work around them and get the information that we need. So we'll get as much as we possibly can. If we can get it all, great. If not, then we may have to come back once the PDV team goes out and does any additional borings at that time. But we'll try to
push
get
as
as
far
many
as we can to get them all done.
Yeah.
That just gives you more certainty in the proposal.
No, we will. It's just, we don't want to upset the apple cart for trying to get a boring that we may or may not need, so. Right away, we do have an initial estimate back on the Washington property. I do want to circulate that to the new authority, but we need to decide how we want to move forward with that. So that is something that'll get circulated out to the new authority to take a look at. And we also, at the July 24th meeting, I want to bring our right-of-way group in and have them walk through the right-of-way process and what we're going to have to do based on being a federal project and the requirements that we're going to have and the process of how we can interact with potential property owners before we have NEPA. So there's some things we can do without NEPA. There are things that we cannot do until we get NEPA. So I want to make sure we walk through that with them and everybody understands where our limits are and what we can and can't do. And then if we want to proceed with other things, because the appraisals do have a date to them. So we don't want to go do a bunch of appraisals and then not be able to implement them because there is an expense to them, but it may make sense to do some voluntary acquisitions. There's a lot of stuff with the port that we could probably do through voluntary acquisition and do prior to NEPA. Or some of like the one in Washington, we may choose to throw an offer out to that person and see where they are. The new authority has condemnation rights both in Washington and Oregon, but we can't go down that route until after we get through the NEPA process. And there are some very strict rules if we go down that route. So we just want to make sure everybody's on the same page with what
Well,
that is.
Mike shared with me the assessment of the property over there, and I went and walked the property. And I'm having a tough time taking A equal to B on what I see out there, and
Like too high or too low,
I'm sorry,
too high or too low.
way high.
Have you ever seen one that wasn't too high?
No.
And
But I don't believe it's in our best interest to just accept it. I think we gotta
Yeah,
go
we have plenty
to look at it, and if you guys feel the same way, we gotta figure out how to go challenge it.
And we do have an opportunity, and that's where right away folks will talk to you. We do have an opportunity to go back to the appraiser and challenge their appraisal. There's also some other things, reports and other things that we could do on the Washington side to rule out whether the property is fully buildable or not. There's and I'm going to get the terms wrong, but there's like a plat over that property that there's some, it's not, easement's not exactly the right word either, but there's a county ordinance that's over that says if you go do these studies and you determine that a certain percentage of it is not buildable, then we could adjust that price based on that. If there's a cost associated with doing those reports. So we need to have some conversation about whether the cost of those reports is worth what it would potentially save us in a cost of the buildable property. So
Was the process that we've been through so far, was it an appraisal or was it?
it was an appraisal. Yeah, we haven't finalized the appraisal. We just had them go through the process of generating an appraisal with some assumptions.
Right, okay.
So
But
we're at,
the
that's the
assumptions are
point. Yeah, that's the point where we're at is basically an appraisal that has not been finalized yet.
Because the allowable uses aren't clear,
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
So that's.
we have to accept some of those assumptions or go out and do some work to
Yeah.
figure out whether it's buildable or not
So
buildable.
there could be huge variation based on that.
Potentially, yes.
How many different property owners are affected?
There's 3 permanent takes and I think 13 or 15 temporary or permanent impacts. With is just easements, but I think there's only 3 permanent takes that we need.
Okay.
And so that's the other thing we'll go through is what all the potential parcels are, and that's based on the current preferred permit. Those may adjust a little bit based on the final design and final alignment. For instance, on the treaty fishing access site, we want to adjust those piers outside of their property because their property actually extends out into the water. So there's some adjustments we want to look at making there to avoid impacts there. So some of those things need to be done. That's why we're only really looking at ones that we know we will have to have. Based on kind of, there's no, unless we completely move the bridge, we're gonna have to have certain properties.
Are there any ownership confusions like there are on this side?
The surveyor and right-of-way team have went through all of that. The surveyor's got a pretty good handle now.
So
There was a ton of,
Nothing as complicated as this?
well, there was a lot of complications in him figuring out, but he feels like, and that was one of the presentations, I want to have him come in and walk through all of the parcels.
Okay.
And where we think what he found out to be the ownership, through all of his research. And then just if somebody's got something that he wasn't aware of, but they did a pretty in-depth discussion with both counties on both sides and local jurisdictions and research and
Yep.
all their things to try to figure out if they know exactly who owns what pieces.
Be ashamed to reach a deal with the wrong party.
Yeah, no, that, yes, we will not do that. They did find out some interesting things over here, like pieces that people thought ODOT owned that they don't own, the port actually owns. I mean, port actually owns all the road down to the signal. There was a thought that there was a big portion of this that was actually ODOT. It's actually not ODOT. And I
That's
haven't
interesting
seen,
because I just had a discussion about that. And there's a feeling that ODOT has the asphalt down through the intersection.
if they do, it would be some type of an agreement outside of ownership. So, and so that's why I want them to come in, walk everybody
Yeah.
through, here's what we found, here's what we think we know. And then see if anybody has any like actual paperwork that says something different. There's a lot of opinions that are different, we found, but we're, trying to find out the actual legal backing to them is difficult to
And
do.
all the posts are 40 feet under silt.
Yes. So anyways, that'll be something upcoming in the first few meetings, just to brief the board on where we are with, because that will be an early activity that we could use funding for, is to go out and take care of some of the right of way, because there usually is long lead times with right of way. So we want to get what we can done. There's a big piece that needs to be worked out with the port. So we want to work through that too. And we talked about the NEPA and the ROD discussion. So that's where we are on that. So that is a quick overview of where we are.
Well, there's another piece that we didn't talk about. It's Amendment 4.
Yes, sorry.
So HMTB was asked to put together the next 3-year work plan. With the first year being 2023-24. They put together that plan, sent it to Kevin at the port. Kevin sent it on to AREP, who has done an ICE of the previous submittal. That ICE has been initially concluded. There's about 10 comments. Those comments now have been sent back to Mike. And over the next couple of days, he'll do a response to that. Kevin will be back. Kevin and I and Mike and AREP will sit down, go through the list. So at the next meeting, we'll bring to you a recommendation of what the analysis shows. The key thing is the next year, 23-24. But for information, they do have 24 and 25 the next 2 years.
Yeah, and there's a number of things in there. We've talked about this that are, if we get funding this year, then there's no more funding grant cycles because we got our funding. So there are assumptions in there that we're going to do things that are cyclical that may or may not happen. So that's why, doing just 1 year out makes a ton of sense because of the number of things that could happen that would change the dynamics of the project. So.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Do you want to do? Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. So we should go back and approve the minutes from the June 5th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect.
Marlo, you're okay? You're on mute.
Still traveling.
We're good.
Yes, sorry, guys. I had issues unmuting, but I am fine with the minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Marlo.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. I think the next thing was to do the recognition.
Yeah.
Move to that.
So we were thinking, it would be nice if we recognized past members for all of the efforts that have taken place on the bi-state working group over the last 5 or so years. So we put together a document. Do you have it?
Yep.
Andy there? And we're going to present one to past Mayor McBride. So let me have one. Let me read it to you. They're all pretty much the same, with the exception of the name of the person, of course. Be it known that served on the bi-state working group in support of replacement efforts of the region's own Hood River White Salmon Bridge crossing the Columbia River. This group became the precursor organization to the recently enacted Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority, which becomes operational on July 1st, 2023. Activities supported by this organization on behalf of the bridge's current owner, Port of Hood River, included: one, development, review, recommendation, approval of a comprehensive project estimate and corresponding schedule. Two, directly met with legislators from states of Oregon, Washington, as well as the federal government to support the project's substantial funding needs. Three, develop and evaluated offers and recommend a contractor to act as the owner's representative on the project, bringing experienced talent into play. Four, evaluated funding options and recommended strategies to fund the project through state, federal, and local content. Five, evaluated tolling options, made recommendations regarding establishing financial reserve to fund future financing needs for the replacement bridge. Six, establish strategies for addressing treaty tribe impacts caused by the construction of a replacement bridge. Seven, drafting and recommendation for approval by governing bodies of the formulation agreement of the new Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority. It is with deep appreciation and recognition of the efforts you have made making the bi-state working group such a success, and it's signed by myself and co-chair Jake Anderson. So
You put that chiseled
pretty
into
cool,
these.
guys.
What's that? I can't believe you have that all chiseled into these. Tablets.
So we have one here for Betty Barnes as well.
I can give it to her.
Okay,
I can
great.
leave it to her, yeah. Thank you.
And for the rest of you, you don't get it because we're going back to work.
We got sent back a year.
But you reflect back on what the bi-state did since it started. You know, I think every one of you can stand up and be counted, and we earned our pay.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you so much for the recognition. I've been keeping track of what you guys have been doing. Not reading all the minutes, but you know, the updates that have been happening and the meetings that have been happening and the outreach meeting that was in the school and the legislative funding. I've been keeping track of that. And you know, slowly but slowly it's happening. Keep the pressure on, and you guys are, and it's moving forward. So I feel really good about everything we've done and everything you guys are still doing. So thank you.
Okay. Okay, Mike, let's move on.
Do we want to do cake now? Because we have about 20 minutes to fill
Ooh,
or 3 o'clock.
Okay, let's get some cake and some coffee here too.
All right,
There's
We'll take
cake.
a couple minute break, 5 minute, 10 minute.
15.
15-minute break.
I can't because I'm waiting on somebody to get here.
There's, I have additional coffee cups, so I only brought a few out. I wasn't sure how many people would have coffee.
We're not burning.
All right, we're gonna restart. The rest of the meeting is gonna really be talking about the Bridge Authority and just some discussion items. No decisions or anything like that, but just organizational discussion around some of the topics that need to happen between now and the first or second meeting. It's not an all-inclusive list, but there's just some key activities that we need to start having some discussion around. One of those is the written affirmation of the director. So we took what was in the interim rules and just basically put it on for everybody to sign. If everybody's comfortable with that, we can start signing those. The way I read the CFA was that it just needs to be signed. I didn't see anything requiring a formal process other than having them sign that statement. And then we will file that in our public records documents. So if everybody's comfortable with that, we can start getting those sent around for everybody to sign up, giving them to the folks that are here in person.
Is there any need for discussion on it? Everybody okay with it? Okay,
You generally, any other process is just ceremonial. The signature is the actual,
Yeah,
is the actual thing.
that's. The next thing, the bi-state working group, although it did function in public meetings, did not really follow Robert's rules of kind of how to run meetings. So we will have to make that shift when we go from the Bridge Working Group to the Bridge Authority. we can decide how formal we want that to be and or informal we want that to be. But I wanted to open that up for any discussion of input that anybody had. I did pick up some books if anybody wants to read what it says. There's the little version and then there's the full latest version if you want that. So, but we do have those available if we need to referee something.
Arthur and I have a running joke where when he finished as mayor and I entered as mayor, he gave me the big book.
Okay,
And then I gave that to Mayor Kate and then she gave it back to me. So we're all about Robert's rules in Hood River.
all right,
That said, what's required is we have to have agreed upon rules of procedure.
we do.
We're not required to follow Robert's rules.
That's
It's
correct.
just
Yeah.
one thing that we're probably most familiar with. You know, there'll be a process of drafting rules, but it's certainly not the highest priority.
So we'll generally use this until somebody wants to do something different. I'm setting the agenda up based on following kind of generic templates of agendas. I've pulled them from different you all from different ones that you use and kind of created a one for us to use. So that'll be something we'll start doing a little more formally than we do for the working group, is to run that way. So same thing with the minutes and the action items and things. We'll take those more according to that. So any other discussion or things that you want researched or done prior to the first meeting?
I have two things on my list, but you may be getting to them, so why don't I wait?
Okay. If Scott is on, okay, so he is not on yet, but he should be on any minute. Scott Reiner from Columbia River Insurance.
Rainier.
Grenier, will be on to talk about the insurance. He's been looking into this over the last few weeks. So he's just gonna come on and brief us about what he's found out. And then it's really, again, just for information at this point, for you all to be aware of where things are falling right now for insurance. In the CFA, it does require certain insurances to be in place prior to the first meeting. So we will, between now and July 10th, should take some action on getting that insurance in place prior to the first meeting, or do it as a first activity of the first meeting. So we'll let Scott go into the details. We can work through that and ask any questions that we may have on that, and then we'll decide how
It said prior to the first meeting. I thought it said that the authority was required to carry insurance for its directors and officers.
It's in the interim rules. And let me do it this way. If we want to dig into it.
It's not in the CFA, you're saying it's in the rules.
It's I think it's in the interim rules of the
So that's not-
CFA.
Those-
Correct.
Those are
That's correct.
modifiable by majority.
That is correct. So, is that? Or is it just me?
But were the interim rules an exhibit that was approved as part of the CFA?
Yes.
Okay. So I think until you, so I don't know that.
There's a chicken and egg.
That's exactly.
I wouldn't lose anything more.
Okay.
I don't think any of this is that critical.
So it's, so Scott will come on, hold on, I gotta. Just 1 second, Scott's got a problem with the invite.
But my feeling, just my feeling is that we can get reasonable insurance and we can do it for a year. Then why would we not want to go ahead and get the insurance done soon? So we are indemnified financially. I don't know about you guys, but I'm doing this free gratis. I don't want to put my net personal wealth at risk at all for this job.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I was want to put anything at risk. The question is, do we spend some time to consider what we're doing? What do we need to spend time on and what don't we have to spend time on? I probably agree with you that insurance is something not worth spending time on, but I want to think about, I want to give it more than a second's worth of thought before saying that.
Yeah, where I'm going is. We could maybe find, once we really understand what we're trying to do. We could probably find a better deal or a different deal on insurance, but to me, it's not worth. Compared to other things that we've got to be doing, just get some insurance.
It's not looking to save money. I'm concerned that we may not be insuring ourselves for the right things. I want to be sure that we're actually covered for what we need to be covered for, and being that this is a creature that. Of which there's a handful of in the country, I want to be sure that we've actually insured ourselves properly.
That I agree with. I have no qualms with that at all. I just don't want to go a period of time with no insurance and there is exposure.
Or I'm just trying to
That's
get
me.
Scott the right meeting stuff and then he can probably answer any
Yeah, somebody
questions.
could find something on July 2nd saying Commissioner Fox.
Highly unlikely, but
Of course, but that's why it's called insurance.
that's right.
The scenario I'm concerned about is we march along for several years thinking we're sure that it's covered or not,
No question about that.
and I've been there too.
Yeah, also good.
All right, I'm trying to get Scott in, so give us just a couple minutes, but while we're doing that. A couple other questions, and this one we probably should wait on, but legal counsel, I think there's a discussion we need to have there. But before we do that, there's some probably quick ones. In the CFA, it refers to the members as directors. Is everybody okay with that being what we call everyone? Because it's not, I don't think it's like commissioner or, and there's a question about should like Mayor Keithler use mayor when she's talking about things related to the bridge authority. My thought would be no, because you don't want to cross reference those items. And is there a concern with that, or it's kind of a general question for everybody, if, and maybe that ends up being a legal question, but my thought was we use director when we're doing bridge authority things and your other titles when you're doing other things.
So I guess I'm not sure what you're using those for. The people on the bridge authority are not there as public officials
Right.
in the other sense, so you're not there representing the county, you're not there representing the city.
Correct.
Or the port. That said, it's common courtesy, people are addressed by their title.
Yep.
So.
And that's my
what you're
question is, what
referring to.
title do you want, does the board want to use? Is it director? Is it something else? How do you all want to be addressed? As a board?
I personally think if you're dealing with board issues or authority issues, you're director. If you happen to be mayor of one of the cities and you're dealing with mayor stuff, you're the mayor. You don't mix the two.
And that's the question, is just making sure everybody's clear. And then, like when we're doing a press release or we're doing something, we use Director Babbitt's, not Commissioner Babbitt's, or Director Anderson, not Commissioner Anderson, just to separate that you're representing the authority in that topic, not the city or the county or whoever else you may represent. Just is everybody comfortable with that, and is that? make
Marla,
sense?
do you have thoughts on that?
She might have missed it.
Hey, guys, sorry, I just joined. I thought you were having a cake break, so I jumped off for 20 minutes.
We ate some for you.
Yeah, the question, Marla, is that on the authority, you're a director. In your city, you're a mayor. How do you use the two? Do you commingle them? Do you say, when you're working on bridge-related stuff, you're a director? When you're working on city stuff, you're the mayor? Do you have a strong opinion on that?
Well, I guess I'd be curious first how the others on the new authority that are holding two elected positions are going to handle the same issue. Sounds like I missed some of the conversation, so I'm guessing maybe the commissioners weighed in.
I answered that I'm gonna keep them separate. So if I'm working on authority stuff, I'm a director. If I'm talking about port stuff, I'm a port commissioner.
And what I explained is that there are two separate concepts. When I'm addressing someone, you address them in a term of respect, and so, you know, mayor is the mayor. And if someone has multiple titles, you address them by, you know, the so-called highest title. That's just standard etiquette. But in terms of a press release, which was the example that was given, which I think is a good one, it should refer to you by the role you play in the organization that's doing the press release, which is director. So there's a subtlety to it. but it's
Yeah,
not-
I agree with that. I feel like advocacy and things that we're doing, representing the bridge and being that entity that is tasked with making those decisions, we're that collective. But separately, I think the way Arthur outlined it makes sense, because there will obviously be a lot of areas. I mean, we just received a grant from Washington State for a transportation alternative program that's a bluff trail that intersects, and I speak to it and how that it will be supported by the bridge project. But in those types of projects or conversations where the bridge comes up, I will speak as the mayor in that interest of the city, but also always disclose that I'm, you know, a member of this authority that's working on the bridge.
I think
Go ahead. How
under,
do you feel, Jake?
So to me, you know, a director is someone who is in charge of managing a department, and usually there's a director. And in most instances, a commission is a group of people who are formed in order to manage a director or an executive director or whatever. I don't, commissioners may be the more appropriate term.
So I think we have two separate concepts. One is how do we keep it separate? The second is what is the term that we use?
Right.
And I think that Mike's point was simply that in the document so far, it says director. And I think the question you really wanted answered was the one that you just answered, which is, are we happy with the term? And I kind of agree with you that it's not the most appropriate term for this. But then we got into the interesting second discussion, which is how do we keep separate the fact that we've got these elected offices and we have this appointed office for many of the folks on this.
I think it'll
Well,
only
you know,
affect you and I, everybody else can be
No, Mayor.
commissioner. So
Mayor.
most people say Commissioner Anderson. And then it's, you know, by state working group commissioner, you just gotta figure that out, but for everyone else, as a mayor, you'll be a commissioner of the bi-state bridge authority. Cause you.
No, you're lost.
You know, out in probably the rest of the world, there are boards with directors on them.
Yeah.
Multiple directors within a board.
I think commissioner is the better term. I think it's a board of commissioners. I've previously always thought of this as commissioners that were seating for the authority. For whatever it's worth. I mean, this is the first conversation where I feel like we're focusing in on a direction where we're calling these new appointments directors. But
Director is a more of a corporate term.
The only issue that I have with it is, to me, and maybe it's just my perception, is that commissioners are elected. We weren't elected to this new agency.
well, I would take issue with that. The New York, New Jersey Port Authority, those aren't elected. They're all appointments, and they're a board of commissioners.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
all right.
that's the same example I was gonna use.
Well, what about like when you guys are in DC advocating for the project? Doesn't it sound better to have mayors and commissioners and
You
council,
say
like,
that.
yeah, so.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're just being introduced as a commissioner or as a director, it lacks the reflection of like the true diversity of the group that's there.
Right, and
So
Jake
maybe-
and I will be
so
commissioner, commissioner.
Right, like maybe as a, right, as a group, you can refer to the group as like the board of commissioners or the bridge commissioners, but individually, they should be still have their elected or,
Well, we have some that are not elected.
Yeah.
For their second job.
right.
Is there any legal reason that you should talk to like the lawyers of the different places you represent to see if there's a reason to separate? That's the only thing I was concerned about, was if I use Commissioner Anderson, how do people know if you're representing the county or the bridge authority? And does that cause any issues for the county or the bridge authority if something is assumed to one or the other? I don't know. Is
Yeah,
But
there a
isn't
concern
that
there?
why he's on the bridge authority to represent the county?
No.
No, it's not. No.
No, we're not
And that's-
representing.
We're,
entities that
we're
work with us.
representing the interest of the village authority.
Of the people that count, you, the interest of the. No, the region, the interest of your residents. You're right, it's interest of Bridge Authority, you're correct.
Right.
So if, this is Mary Franker from PFM, if I could just interject. I mean, when you're going to start applying for a TIFIA loan, I mean, you're going to be applying, the new board is going to be the applicant for that obligation. And so they're gonna have a sort of a fiduciary obligation to kind of be the borrower and sort of meet the standard of, you know, you're as a director of the organization, you're taking on the debt and those kinds of things. And so you need to be sort of the members of the board of the authority as opposed to the individual jobs that you have otherwise. So that it's a way of sort of thinking about kind of who you're representing once you're the applicant on that loan.
Right, I don't think there's any confusion on that, I think it really got down to a terminology question. And to the etiquette.
Formal versus informal.
Formal versus informal, exactly,
Yeah.
So
Right,
all we need is formally be called in a press release and whatnot, and then informally, or commissioner, mayor, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're just talking about if we're gonna be directors or commissioners or whatever, so. To me, it doesn't matter what we're called, it's just a name. So just pick a formal one, be good.
So we can change it, what's in the CFIA by a vote.
Yes.
We don't have the full representation here yet.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was gonna interject with too, is isn't this a conversation more appropriate when we have the full seated group at their first meeting? Or is this really something we need to be figuring out today?
Yeah, and that's, and just to remind everybody, we're just having discussion today. This is not about making decisions on any of these. It was more of at the first meeting, or once we stand up the agency. This is something we'll need to get clarification around so that we can communicate out about it. And people, give some people some clarity on what we're gonna do.
I
So
think Mike was just wondering how much you should invest in placards for the first.
I was, yes, yeah, name tags. So I was worried about name tags. So. Anyways, all right, let's move on. I'm still trying to figure out how to get Scott into the meeting, but we will get him there at some point. Email addresses. This is another one. We're going to set up email addresses for everyone with the @hrwsba.org for the 12 members, the members and the alternates. If you want to forward that to something else or whatever you want to do with it, I think you can do that, but we thought that everyone should have a Bridge Authority email for public records. Because again, then it starts to mix things, and if there's a public records request and you're using your county email and there's a Bridge Authority public records request, then you're gonna open up the county to have to produce all the documents, and we're trying to keep that. Or if you're no longer represented by that county or whatever, you should still have a way on the authority to be emailed and whatever. So is that make sense?
Surely we need separate email, I can't believe everything has details, but, are we qualified for a .gov?
We can check on that. We were gonna use .org
Homeless-
only because it was the same as the website address.
So Homeland Security has. been-
.gov, yeah, .gov requirement is the highest elected official for the agency, certifying that they are a public, a city or county, or I'd imagine a special district. So that's something that I think once the board's seated, they could pursue to get a .gov. We just did it for White Salmon.
Right, and the reason to do it is that then control through Homeland Security, and that means that you don't have the possibility of foreign actors. So there's actual reasons why recommendations were made like 4 or 5 years ago that all governments switch over to .gov domain for security reasons.
Okay, so do you want us to hold off then until we get
I
the
would definitely
.gov
check with
designation
Homeland Security and
first?
see if
Okay,
we're qualified.
But if we do, go ahead and do it.
I think that'd be great, yeah.
Okay. We'll do that. Scott, is that you on the phone?
It is me on
All
the
right.
phone. Sorry about
Sorry.
that, guys.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm not sure why that got all messed up, but, anyway, so we've got Scott, and I'm gonna mess this last name up again.
Rainier.
Scott Rainier, just like the mountain, just spelled different then. Okay, got it now. Scott's on the phone. He's with Columbia River Insurance, who does the insurance for the port. And he's been looking into options for the insurance for the new authority. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott. Scott, if you could just give them a brief overview of what you've found
Sure.
out in some of your research, and then I'm sure there will be some questions that we can talk through.
Okay. Sorry, guys, for being a little bit late with the technology there. I don't know what I've got going on, but nonetheless, our office has worked with the Port of Hood River for a long time. And as the Bridge Authority was coming together and the new venture, we were initially asked to do some research into the process of having the program that is available in the state of Oregon, which is through Special Districts Association, be sort of the lead provider of insurance for the new commission. We began that process several months ago, and we have not completed it with them yet due to the bi-state nature of what is about to occur on July 1st. I believe that over a period of time, special districts will likely come around because they do have other districts in the state of Oregon that are connected to the state of Washington. They are just needing to work through some of the nuances of things on their end. And it's going to probably be this time next year until they may be ready to do that, may be ready to accept a new authority. So with that in mind, as we began to feel things slowing down with SDIS, we went out to basically to the independent market to speak with the carriers that deal with public entities in other states. And I should have said this from the beginning. The reason that we went to Special Districts of Oregon is that they have a very comprehensive insurance program, and they provide it at pricing that is literally not able to be met in the open market. And so that's why it was the original initial focus. So when we realized that that wasn't going to be available for July 1 of 2023, we proceeded out, as I just said, to some of the carriers that work in the public entity arena in other states. And I was extremely hopeful that we would have the response back from Chubb Insurance this afternoon, and we still may, but my hope had been to have it available to share with you folks during this meeting. We have 3 carriers that are providing responses. CNA Insurance is providing a response, Travelers Insurance as well, and then Chubb. And I anticipate the response from Chubb to probably be slightly more competitive than the other 2, just from the research that we've done. But at the same time, what has kind of slowed the process down, and Michael and I and Kevin, and we've all kind of had this conversation, is that the entity really hadn't come even into clarity as to who was going to be on the board until last Tuesday evening. And so when you're dealing with insurance carriers and trying to explain to them that there's an entity that the board members have not yet been identified, they have not yet filed for a federal ID number, not sure exactly where their address is going to be. There were a lot of things that made underwriting a little bit cautious as we began to kind of go through the steps. And it really wasn't until the last couple of weeks that we've gotten to the right people, and they understand kind of where we are in this process. And they plan to offer terms that would be effective, able to be effective as of 7/1, which I think is, at least from my side of the research on this, is somewhat critical in the way the authority is going to come together, because I believe the rules state that the authority can't have an official meeting until there's insurance in place. And that brings up a long list of other questions as to how we can put the insurance in place until the board would have the opportunity to review it. But those are things that I think we're going to work through this week and get resolved. Michael, is that kind of as you know things as well to date, or would you like some more detail than that?
Can you expand on the types of insurance that you're looking at?
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great question. So clearly the most important thing is to make sure that we have coverage in place to protect the board members and basically the decision-making process of the board. So the initial proposal will contain directors and officers coverage. It will contain what they call public entity errors and omissions coverage, and it will also cover or provide general liability coverage for the formation of this new authority.
Okay. So let's pause there, Scott, and open it up for any questions.
Yeah, Scott, Arthur Babbitt's here. What order of magnitude are we talking about for the costs for a year of this insurance?
So great question. And I don't believe that certainly as we get started, the order of magnitude is going to be all that much. Our concern long-term, Arthur, is that the pricing through SDIS and the expanse of what they provide coverage-wise compared to the open market, so to speak, that's where the order of magnitude would probably begin to show. But the expectation, at least from everybody that I've been speaking with over the last probably 2 months, is that this, particularly the first 6 months or so, the cost of the coverage is not going to be that great.
Can you give us a feel when you say not that great?
I like that question. My suspicion is that if I had to stake my life on it, the proposals that arrive sometime this week will be, for all of the coverage I listed earlier, are going to be somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000 on an annual basis.
And that's for coverage of all of the quote directors and officers.
That is correct. And not to give you kind of room for pause or the wishing that SDIS was in place, but even at that level, the $10,000 to $15,000 level in the open market, my suspicion is that if SDIS had done what they had initially committed to doing, those expenses or the premium would have been somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000.
Yeah, this is Mike Fox. I think where our risk really starts to take off, if it really does take off, is when we award the next contract. And that whole awarding process, the evaluation and the selection process, is an area of risk for us. And that'll take place December, January timeframe. Prior to that, I don't see us making many decisions that's going to immediately have a major risk tied to it. You still want to have insurance, but the next big one will be with the evaluation award of the contract.
We haven't given anyone any reason to be angry at us yet.
Right.
And Arthur, that is kind of the process in which we're operating with CNA Travelers and Chubb right now, which is that we need to get the authority together. We need to get the simplest of things, the federal ID number, a mailing address, and so forth, so that really we can have everything lined up. And then with the understanding of, what does your scope of work look like in the first 12 months, 24 months, and then that's going to play into the underwriting process as well. And it was just as Commissioner Fox had explained just now, that's the way we understood it, that a lot between this July and the end of the year was going to be more of a preparation phase before you guys take that next big step.
So at the first meeting, will you be in a position to present to us a quote or information from us? At that first meeting?
So, yeah, my plan is to actually be able to provide that to you before the meeting. And if is your first meeting on the 11th of July? What was the scheduled date?
July 10th, and we're gonna
10th, okay.
finalize that here in a minute, so that's
Okay.
tentatively July 10th.
So my plan was to have this information out prior to July 1 for the 6 folks to review. And I can't say that there is an exposure between basically when you are formed on July 1st and your first meeting on the 10th. So there, Kevin and I kind of knocked this around a lot of different ways, which was, could we bind the coverage with the understanding that the board could completely make a different choice once they finally met some 10 days later. And I don't know that that's really a bad idea.
I like that.
I always look at, I look at these things as if I was going to be on that authority, even though you haven't met and nothing's really been spoken about in any official sense. If the formation date is July 1, I do think there's upside to having the coverage in place on that date.
So what you're thinking is that we could give the nod to the port, and the port could go ahead and initiate this action? And then novate the policy over to the new board? But we're covered at July 1?
July, I mean, that would be, and I don't know sort of how those inner workings would need to take place. And one of the things that we spoke about kind of on our last group call was, if you guys identify who your attorney may be, the attorney for the authority may say, this needs to be in place by July 1, but that attorney notification may not occur until your first meeting. So I think Kevin was working on some ideas, and I'm sorry he's not on the call today. But my plan was, the first viable proposal I have in hand was to forward to him and then kind of get an idea of where he wanted to go next from there with that. Because there certainly is a way to bind the coverage on July 1 before any official first meeting has occurred. And then basically refer it to the board during your first meeting for any alterations, changes, and so forth. And, to me, that would be a more comfortable spot for the 6 people who are providing their time and their expertise.
Well, it's not only the 6, it's the 6 alternates as well.
You are correct.
So that's one option. Another option may be is that we have 4 members of the new board named that are in attendance of this meeting. We can't do that.
You can't do that.
Right.
We don't exist, we can't act in any way.
Then I would recommend that we get Kevin to buy the insurance. And then if we don't like it, we'll change it later. I feel very uncomfortable not having insurance on July 1.
Well, this concept of binding it, I think, Scott, can you explain, as I understood it, the concept of binding is, it would not, you stated that it would be with the understanding that the board, when it convenes, might choose not to accept that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So basically the binding of coverage is basically setting the date as when coverage starts. So we would do it as of July 1st. And then at the first opportunity that the board meets, they could decide to cancel it. They could decide to do something else. You could decide to make changes to it, or you could decide that it is well enough as it is for this moment and continue on. The interesting thing, and I think Michael has been on these calls with us, is a little bit of the way the verbiage reads is that the board can't meet until it has insurance. But in theory, the board is the one that needs to authorize the insurance. So I think that's why Kevin felt as though he may take that step, authorize it as of July 1. And the fact of whether the board authorizes it or somebody else authorizes the binding of coverage does not in any way jeopardize the coverage.
And if I can jump in here too, this is Debbie, by the way. Kevin and I have talked about this, and he is okay with the idea of the port initially, initializing the insurance and then having the commission, the bridge authority approve it at its first meeting. So he is totally on board with the port doing that.
Because I haven't heard anyone object to this, so I think we're good.
Marla, do you have any concerns?
No,
Okay, anybody else have any concerns? Then I would say, please suggest to Kevin to proceed.
Debbie, that might be something we need to put in because Kevin's not coming back until I think the 3rd of July.
Yeah, and I can work with Jen on that.
Okay.
So Mike was just saying this is for Scott's benefit. Mike
Yep.
Chairman was just saying that Kevin's out until the 3rd, and so Genevieve may be the one would be the one
Okay.
that we'll be working with, but she's the
She's aware of
executive
it.
director pro tem, so
So-
we'll get through
Okay.
it.
So let's make
Yep.
sure, again, from a board commissioner point of view. If there's any hiccup there at all, get a hold of me quickly.
We will.
And I'll make sure that the chair and others are involved to make sure it goes through.
Yeah, yep. If anything comes up, I'll be in touch with you and we'll all figure it out.
Okay,
Okay.
All right, Scott, are you good?
Yeah, that's a great result. I was nervous to not have something in place the date that the authority becomes official. So that's fantastic. And I will, at the moment I have these proposals as they come in, I will get them out to the folks and let them be distributed so that you guys can begin to see what's happening.
Okay. Thanks for calling in, Scott.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good afternoon. Take care.
All right, the next item, do we want to have just a general discussion about legal counsel, or do you want to go through the other items and then leave general counsel for last?
I don't see why we would, this is important, let's talk about it now.
Perfect. All right,
let's get into legal counsel, so make sure we cover it before we run out of time.
Yep. Sounds good. So Arthur, I'm going to turn it over to you for now. I think
Right.
you all have had some conversations. So.
Yeah, just a little bit. So first I checked with our county attorney to kind of get her opinion on this. And there were two things I wanted. First was I wanted to get her opinion on whether we existed actually as of July 1st as a corporation, or whether the corporation required someone to file paperwork with the Secretary of State's office. And she said she's gonna have to read through it more carefully, but that she thinks that it may be that we actually do exist because we're given authority to the legislature to charter the organization. So the action that we took as individual counties and cities and port may have in fact created a corporation. Which is kind of funny, because usually it's the Secretary of State that creates the corporation, but it seems like we may have done it through another path. That said, she agreed that the sort of organization that we are is a complex one, and given the size of the sorts of contracts that we're going to be doing and the complexity of operating in two states as a quasi-government, that she felt that the appropriate thing to do would be to issue an RFQ for council and to bring in and interview some parties, some potential parties. So this is where I think some of the discussions we've had, the one-on-one discussions have gone as to, I know Mike Fox originally had suggested that he was hoping that we would be able to get a local attorney, because it'd be great to have someone who could be present at the meetings and kind of be right here. And I had expressed concern that because this is so complicated, I think you need an expert. And I think Mike,
And I agree back with you on that, especially for the first year, or maybe even 2 years.
Yeah.
And maybe after that, you could you can ease off a little bit, but.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
agree, the complexity of it starting up is gonna be big.
So it is, in my view, what we're looking for is we're looking for one of the big Portland or Seattle firms that has significant expertise in everything from governance to bonding, all the aspects of the sorts of contractual things that we're going to be doing. And that it, we should put out an RFQ to that effect. Which brings me into the second problem, which is we don't have any fiscal wherewithal at this moment. So I think before we put out an RFQ, we have to figure out who is putting out the RFQ, or first of all, how we're preparing the RFQ, and then how we're planning to pay for it. So I thought the two elements that we would need to start with is number one, an RFQ, and number two is a brief from staff on what the initial and long-term fiscal picture is going to be for this entity. In other words, how does this entity do business in the very short term? And then over the next year, and then beyond that. And I know we've talked about that a little bit. I know you guys, this is certainly not a new concept to you, taking a look at it, but this is something which is going to tie very closely into, we'll be making a decision to hire an attorney at a potentially, clearly it's not going to be a cheap thing to hire. And we need to know that we have money to pay those bills. So those are the two things that I would like. There's no agreement to do RFQ and agreement to ask staff to prepare this funding picture for us.
So an RFQ. Isn't HNTB capable of running that competition?
I would have to check on that. I think we should probably ask Bill Oley if that falls under our scope.
It could be a conflict of interest too, but there.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't
Um,
think it would be a conflict of interest.
Well, it's an attorney who would be administering this contract with
That's
them.
true. But I'm not sure that it would be all that complicated. I don't want to commit the port here to this,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure that it's all that
The RFQ should
complicated.
not be that complicated.
And so-
It's simply a matter of description of scope.
Right.
So that you get high-end firms to recognize, oh, this is actually an interesting thing that. This isn't something where they're putting this out and then they're gonna hire, some guy off the block. This is a serious request that we should take seriously.
Yeah, and what would take a little bit of time and I haven't done attorney services, but when I've done like audit services, for example, there's a bit of outreach that you do to let the firms know that, yes, we know this is going to be expensive, and we know that,
Yeah,
we know your
exactly.
fees are going to be higher than what this little, entity that doesn't even exist yet may think. And so just to reassure them so that you do get a quote back from them. Otherwise, they'll say it's not worth their time to even respond. So we just need some outreach to make sure they know it's worth their time to respond.
That's exactly my concern.
So who could we get to write the RFQ? To me, a piece of it is the government side of the operation. But the other piece of it, and that's important right now because nothing exists, so we need their help to set it up. But the other piece of it is the major design construction contracts that we're going out with, and that's going to be pretty big money. And we want to make sure that we run a clean procurement so we don't get protested, because that's where the money gets expensive very quickly. So we need somebody that understands that process.
But this is just, you're just describing what the scope of work looks like in the RFQ.
Right.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You highlighted the two major areas. That, so why we're going out for this.
But we need that RFQ pretty quick.
Should we, as the authority, be the ones setting the RFQ parameters and just send that?
I'm sorry, say again.
Shouldn't we, as the authority, be the ones just setting those parameters in the RFQ and then sending that out? So that's not be that simple.
I think it is that simple.
Yeah.
I think, but what we can do today is we can request, if the port has the wherewithal to write this up, we can request it to be presented at the first meeting of the authority.
Okay.
So we can have a head start on doing it, and I suspect it's, like I said, like Debbie said, it's not gonna be that complicated. But get it kicked off now and then July 10th. You can.
I
have
think
it sent out.
I think the two components is the port can certainly do the governance piece of it. But I think we need HNTB to add in the complexity of the procurements that we're faced with.
Yeah, but
I think we
We'll
could
help
take
that
that on
with
as
the
a
client.
joint.
Yeah.
We take that on as joint, and that way the port can kind of oversee it from the aspect of, you know, not having this conflict of, okay, we're putting the scope together, but then, like you say, HNTB could theoretically have the idea, well, we don't want too much scrutiny of us.
Right.
And so at the port side, though, can look at that and make sure that we do have the sufficient scrutiny over HNTB type contracts.
And the Bridge Authority will have the approval.
You'll have the ultimate approval, yes, yes.
Are we okay doing that?
Does that work?
I think it's a path forward.
And I did want to mention really quickly, because I had that thought, and I don't know, I mean, I know you guys know this, but the CFAs, once they were signed, those were submitted to the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah.
And I think that was supposed to meet that requirement of therefore allowing it to be formed when those CFAs were signed.
Right, but have we gotten anything back from them?
We
You know,
did
it's
from
kind
one.
of funny.
We got an email back. We say got back, we got acknowledgement that Oregon received it. We did not get anything back from Washington.
Right.
Well, and the main thing would be Oregon, because Oregon is your state of governance, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm gonna feel a lot better when an attorney who actually is responsible for this looks and says, yeah, you guys, you've done what you have to do.
Well, and I can reach out to the Secretary of State's office too.
Yeah.
That's easy,
Thank
okay.
Okay, so if that's ready for the 10th, the first meeting. What's the kind of schedule are we looking at to hold the competition and make the award?
I don't know what's usual in this area, but you have to do whatever's usual.
I think it could very easily be 2 to 3 months.
No. You talking about for the legal contract?
Yeah.
No, it's, you leave it open for, 3 or 4 weeks max, and then you interview and select.
Yeah, it can be pretty, you can condense that pretty tight
Okay.
for something like this where it's services like
Professionals.
this.
They have
Yeah,
a-
professional
they have a
services.
department that's just responsible for preparing these things, and they're ready to go in a moment.
So let's.
Yeah.
I suggest we say that. We want to target 6 weeks from the time the board says go. We've got an award.
I would, honestly.
I think that's for the new board. I think a lot of these conversations are, I think that'll be a lengthy initial meeting, but I think we're getting ahead of ourselves and not being fair to those that aren't at the table right now and have just been seated on this new authority to be involved with all of these discussions as they rightly should be.
And what I was gonna say is I would feel more comfortable if Debbie is going to be kind of poking around in that area to just to, if you talk to 1 or 2 firms and ask them, hey, what do these things usually look like?
Okay, I can do that. Definitely,
And
Who's
and add in.
specialized in this
complexity as
field.
well.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just look at the League of Cities and
Yeah.
AOC.
Good call, Marla.
and Look at the advertisements in there.
All right, any other discussions around legal counsel? So we want to do at this point, otherwise we'll put that on the agenda.
Does anybody have a concern running without legal counsel for? A period of time after January the 10th? July. Or July 10th, excuse me.
No, but there is, I'd like people to think about the philosophical question. I stated what I thought, that we should be hiring, a big firm with tons of expertise in this area, but that's not, if everyone agrees, great, but think about that, because that's a decision that has to be made in July.
Yes, sir.
What I've really noticed since becoming mayor post-COVID is the tele-lawyer business is brisk. I mean, my buddy's the county counsel for Wheeler County from Portland, like that access now is really enhanced. I think going to the expert on tele is a wise choice.
But also, so in this decision, when we hired Dan, who's the current city attorney, we previously had a local attorney with very limited breadth of experience and knowledge, and hiring a Portland attorney who was attorney for multiple cities, who was an expert in land use law, who had a real authority there made a huge difference in the last, it's now what, 15+ years, right? It's just made a huge difference in the city's ability to function. So I feel really good about that decision. That's why I am in favor of us going us in the direction here.
Okay, keep going.
Meeting schedule for the new bridge authority. Right now, I'll just tell you what we were planning. You all tell me what you want to change. We were planning the second and fourth weeks of the month. The day of the week, we can keep it on Mondays, where that's when the bi-state working group, or another day. I know Tuesdays are typically out, maybe Wednesday.
I think this is a good example of something where we have to find out when people are available.
Yep.
And I don't want to take for granted, we're available now, obviously, because we're here, but it would be a shame if we chose a time where some of the board members could never attend.
Agree.
But this is where Marla just brought up, and I agree with her. We don't have those other members here.
That's right.
Maybe we sent out an email to the new members to think about when do you want to meet and be ready to discuss it at the first meeting.
So right now, the first two meetings are the 10th and the 24th, 2 to 4. Is everybody comfortable at least those two meetings being consistent with what we've been doing? We can change it on the 10th.
We can change them.
We can change it on the 10th if we want to change it, but everybody's comfortable with the 10th from 2 to 4, at least as our initial meeting.
Gotta start somewhere.
And then, okay, and then right now, we're looking at having it at the White Salmon Council Chambers. And we can decide that meeting on the 10th, whether we continue to have it there or we want to rotate it or whatever scenario we want to do.
So what, this is Mondays.
It's July the 10th,
It's a Monday.
Monday from 2 to 4.
Is everybody's open on Mondays?
Well,
I just want to make sure there's
Everybody's
someplace to go
free?
after the meeting. Yeah.
Well, it's everybody's
Everybody's
a restaurant. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, everybody's brewing, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start on the 10th. We'll have the succession on the 10th, determine our frequency, or at least it can always change, but at least gives us something to get on the calendars and get out to everybody. So we'll for right now just put out the 10th meeting. Mailing address. So sounds simple, but we need a mailing address because it has to go on everything and can't really do anything else till you get a mailing address. So one potential had been to put up to use the RBMC office for right now. Is that okay, at least as an initial office address to use that? And does anybody feel like it can be both the physical address and the mailing address? Would somebody prefer to have that as the physical address and set up a PO box as the mailing address? And is there a preference? Washington, Oregon? Does it matter to anyone?
so the
Just wanted-
question that I would have is that, let's say we did that. Now, you folks aren't in there all the time, 5 days a week. What do we do if you're not there?
And
How do we
somebody
get
delivers a
that mail?
bridge.
Somebody delivers.
Delivers a bridge.
Somebody delivers a bridge, you're not there, they say, oh, I guess we're gonna take it someplace else, and we lose out on the bridge.
Leave a note on the door, say they'll be back tomorrow.
Okay,
with the
that'll
bridge.
work. Never mind, I'm good with that.
Yeah, one of the things that we are planning to do with Amendment 4 is to have an office admin, bring them in and have them 5 days a week here. So starting sometime July, August, whenever we can get that position filled, we will have somebody in that office 5 days a week.
And
So-
you're looking at a local hire.
Local hire for that, yes. So that can resolve somebody not being there. And there are mailboxes, I think we need to get one put up for us, but there are mailboxes, I wouldn't call them secure. But there are mailboxes on the building out there. And it's just an option. I mean, whatever we want to do, we just need to get a mailing address as soon as we can. So-
Why don't we just get a PO box that's based in
Continue.
Oregon, since that's where it's located, and then once we determine the actual location of the offices, we go with that as the physical address.
So to get a tax identification number, which you're gonna need sooner than later, we have to have a physical address. And it doesn't matter as long as we have a physical address. It doesn't matter what it
We've got
is.
Mailing address and a physical address, so it sounds simple, that this can be our physical address, we can get a PO box as our mailing address. And And to me, the only thing that matters is that it's not the port address, because we need that space.
Okay, so is everybody good? We'll use that as the physical address. Somebody will get a PO box and get that set up. We'll figure out who somebody is.
Raise your right hand,
I'm sorry.
raise your right hand. That's your left hand.
Peanuts.
All right, we'll get that taken care of. I just want to make sure there wasn't any very specific things with that. Tax ID number is the next thing. Sam's number. Debbie's gonna take the lead on getting those numbers. There's an application process for that. She's done it before. Once we get the physical address and mailing address, then I think she'll be off and running, getting all that. Is there anything else you need?
The only thing I'll need is to know who is whatever the title is, the first
Co-chair.
co-chair, or whatever, will have to sign the tax identification number application.
I'll just give you a warning that we just got a Sam's number after 2.5 months. They completely changed the process.
Yeah, they had changed it so we had to renew ours in February, I think it was, and they had changed it then. So existing ones actually weren't taking that long then, but that's why I want to get moving on it ASAP, because then we have to get the TIN number and then we can get the SAM's number as soon as we have the 10, so. Or get that application going. Like you say, there's a lot of talk about it taking a long time, so.
So we gotta decide who's gonna sign.
Yeah, just whoever's the
So
first
if I read
co-chair.
On July 10th.
Let me talk for just a tiny bit. If I read the CFA under the interim agreement, either Jake or myself will be acting for a period of time. And it could be, we need to decide between the two of us.
It hops off every 3 months.
3 months,
Yeah,
correct.
or unless we decide something else.
Correct.
So, and I'm okay if you're okay. I'll take the first 3 months,
Okay,
so we can come down here, we can sign and keep things going.
and as long as we can say at the time that you signed it, you were the first co-chair, it can change like immediately after you sign it, as long as we just say that you were that person when
Yeah,
you
and I
signed
think
it,
to
so.
see if the way I read it, Mike, correct me, or Arthur. The way I interpret it, that's what it takes. It's just between you and me, who's gonna be the first one.
Initially, yeah.
It's
as
kind of
the interim.
automatic, and then the new board decides
So
what you want to elect.
I pulled those sections on the sheet that I gave you under the board officers. I pulled those sections out of the CFA and out of the interim rules on development of a co-chair. So that's the way I read it. It kind of rolled back to who the current chairs were of the bi-state working group. As long as they got appointed, then it was up to those two to figure out who would be the first co-chair, and then they would alternate every 3 months or some other cycle that they decided on. And then at the meeting January of 2024, the board will then select the 2-year co-chairs at that point moving forward. But the interim chairs will be Mike and Jake until January of 24.
And only by that argument, both counties elected to appoint people for 1-year terms.
Yes.
Because of ambiguity in the CFA about staggering, so yeah, we'll just play that stuff there.
So, okay.
We
All right.
didn't want to make look at that county look bad, so we followed.
Who can take me later?
I won't say last thing. The next thing was public records and public meeting rules. We are looking at JLA's working on coordinating a training for everyone. If you can let us know your availability, and we'll send an email out on this also, but your availability between now and July 10th. We'd like to try to get that done if we can get the trainer. It's Elaine.
The Lane, and I don't know her last name.
She does it from what I've been told for everyone.
Does
So
it for the port, right?
Yeah, she's done the port ones before. I think she's big with League of Oregon Cities, I
is,
think
yeah.
is kind of her claim to fame, but Oregon Public Records is the same for everybody, so.
So
The important one would be those new folks that don't have existing experience in the government
Correct.
body.
yeah, and for the ones in Washington to understand the
To know.
differences between Oregon and Washington too. Whatever those are, don't know what they are, but so we'll send out an email get the availability. We'll try to get that done if we can get her prior to the first meeting. But just be aware that that training is coming up. It'll probably be a joint training with new port commissioners, as well as the authority, board members. And we like to do all 12 if at all possible.
It's a good refresher too.
So, yeah,
Laws
and
change.
anybody that's gonna be, I'd say Patty and
I'm gonna
Kelly and
go if I can
me
make it
and
work.
Debbie, others that are gonna be involved in the public records, public meeting process should be attending that too.
Do we know unambiguously that this organization is subject to RS 192?
The public records laws, we'd have to ask legal. I mean, I am assuming we are because we are a public agency, that we would. So until we get something that says otherwise, I would
Also, until I
assume that we
I
are.
found some other commissions who explicitly are not.
I'd be surprised if this one was, but again, I think let's go with that we are until legal counsel says that we're not, and then we can, the board can decide if they want to or not after that, I guess. So, that works. Better to be on that side than the wrong side. So, all right, so we'll keep you updated on that. As far as managing public records requests, and where we're gonna store public records. Does anybody have a strong opinion on where the bridge authority's public records are stored? We could store them on the cloud. We can store them at the port on servers. We could store them at the future office at some point. It may end up being all the above through the transition, but does anybody have any issues with that or
Just
concerns with?
report back everything up to the cloud.
Yep.
So, okay, so for now, that's probably where we will. It's probably the easiest place to do it. And then we were thinking that Jen for now would handle any public records requests. Unless one of the other 6 entities wants to have their public records person do it.
Wish we had one.
So. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go with
Yeah.
that for now.
One of the early actions is going to need to be to establish IGAs with
The port and whoever,
whoever
Yeah.
we're contracting with for services.
correct. So,
And
okay,
you folks are doing a draft.
Yes, yep.
When will we see the first draft?
Kevin has handed it off to me and the legal counsel to work through this week and to have it ready for him on Monday. So I think he was basically wanting me to wrap it up. So
This
I
is the
think-
IGA.
Monday, yes, our initial stab at it, so.
all right. And then I just included some stuff in there. We don't have to go through those for the commissioner or the chairs and kind of what some of their responsibilities are, the first chair and second chair. You guys are familiar with that, so I just put that in there for your information. Additional kind of individual items, bank information, bank account. Debbie will work with you all on that once she gets the federal tax ID numbers and all that. Is there any preference on bank? Just, we were thinking local bank, maybe Umpqua. I said that right?
You did.
I think they're on both sides of the river, so if I don't know if there's a preference to have it on the Washington or Oregon side, or.
And
would you
again,
rather
you don't,
use somebody
again,
else?
a lot of this stuff that Mike is throwing out, you don't have to decide
Decide,
today,
yeah.
so we don't want to make it sound like you have to decide. We're just throwing it out there so you think about it,
about it.
so that, because you won't need a bank account until you have money.
Yeah,
So
but you
it'll be
will-
a month or two.
Yeah, you have till like September, right? I mean, that's when the initial.
When the toll
tax
money
toll
starts
difference,
coming in, for sure,
Um,
then.
Yeah. I mean, something else for the authority to think about is that we've got 2 grants coming in. Do we want to try to set the grant and the Washington money up to go directly to the new authority? Or go to the port and then get transferred or left with the port or whatever at some point. So that'll be something for the
We
board
need to
to
wait
think
for the
about.
chance to
Yeah,
talk
no,
about
that's just something to be thinking about.
Again, to
of
be
how
thinking
they want
about.
to be, what you want to do with that, and that'll dictate when you need that account, potentially. The website is up. On our project website, there is a Bridge Authority page JLA will be reaching out to the 12, at least the 6 Bridge Authority members, probably all 12, to do just kind of an interview with you. Just about why are you on the board, just so that we can put a small blurb on the site introducing you to the public. There was also some discussions about doing some in-person meetings of some sort, like coffee with, or something on both sides of the river. So just be aware that those things will be coming up. You'll have to tell us if you want to participate, you don't, if it's too much, if it's not enough. Let us know and we'll adjust accordingly, but just know that that's some of the things being talked about. And that they will be
You're gonna follow us around with Jones again?
possibly, yes. Business cards, if you want a specific one, I don't know if anybody's doing those anymore. We can get them made up. We've got a template. Logos, Jake's gonna lead the discussion on the Bridge Authority logo.
Be very short.
We will have to get some kind of an identity for the Bridge Authority, so they're gonna come up, what we were gonna do is come up with 3 alternatives, bring them to the July 10th meeting, hopefully make it a short discussion, be done with that conversation. So just something else that'll be coming up. Community events, there will be some of those over the summer. There's one next week, the 6th and the 7th, the one in downtown on Hood River. So we will be reaching out to the members, just letting you know that we're going to the events. If you would like to attend, then you can join us there. We'll on the 10th update you on the upcoming events. We're, I think, going to do Huck Fest again this year. So we'll keep you all informed of those, and the ones who want to come and attend, you'll know about them and can come participate in those meetings. We're setting up a new Zoom account that's specific to the authority YouTube channel, just to get all the meeting stuff organized. The other thing in the packet is the first meeting draft agenda for July 10th. Just take a look at that, shoot me an email if there's things on there that you think are missing. This is very draft, but wanted to give you at least an initial list of things we were thinking about putting on there. We want to do a couple presentations. One of them is just a very short project overview for the new members, to bring everybody up to speed kind of on the project. A little short background on the current funding on the project, and then the communications will be the bigger one, updating everybody on that. We're planning to do this at the first few meetings where we'll have these presentations, and we don't want to overwhelm you with like 10 presentations on one meeting. So we're going to space them out. So like the second meeting will be right away a deeper dive into the funding and financing grant stuff, along with how we're going to report out, showing you the dashboard that we have out, getting you access to the portal, just showing you ways you can come in and monitor kind of what's going on the project. So we'll feed you these gradually over the next couple months. Governance, we'll go through kind of some of the things we talked about today, making actual decisions at the meeting on the 10th, or at least giving direction on to how to get to the decisions, and the timing of those. And then started July 24th, which will be our second meeting. Again, just the agenda there for you to start looking at and give us some feedback.
You sent this to the new members.
I will send it out to all of the new members. I've got hard copies for the ones that are here today, but I will send it out to everybody today or tomorrow. The other thing to look at is when you look at the June 10th meeting, there was some discussion about the project and dividing up into committees. And there's 5 suggested potential committees for the board. It's engineering and construction, and the titles can change. Governance, funding and financing, operations, and communications. And there's a few bullets under there on what we were thinking would go into each one of those categories. The reason for those is to start thinking about how we can be nimble as an agency. When we get the contractor on board and we start running the project full out, we will, let's say it this way, and maybe it sounds wrong, we will not be able to wait for 2 weeks to make a decision for the contractor and the designer. So we are hoping by separating these out that we can set up an approach where there can be a smaller group with a authority lead that has delegated authority to make decisions for that group, that can keep things moving, and then some understanding of what needs to be brought back to the full board and what can be made by those individuals. So just think about that and how we can function quickly and nimbly to make decisions to keep the contractor and the designer moving as we get really into design and construction, because it will kill us if we have to wait for 2 weeks to make a decision for the contractor.
As an example, when we're really heavily into design and construction, we're probably burning through $2 to $2.5 million a week. So you convert that to $500,000 a day. So if it takes us 2 weeks, when people are out there in the field to make a decision, cha-ching, 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 that doesn't mean to say that we should just make a decision and go, but we've got to set ourselves up where we take the best information available, make the call and go. We probably won't get all of them right. We'll have to go back and fix some of them, but you got to keep the train moving when the train's on the track.
Yeah, and I mean, the big thing is the contractor will hit you with delay claims if it ends up on his critical path, and you will pay a lot to avoid if they have that happen. So it's really just thinking about how can we be as nimble and flexible as we can to make decisions, and when things need to come to the board for, you know, major decisions, what does that look like?
This is an area where you really need legal counsel.
Yeah.
The authority can delegate it. The authority can delegate authority. And there are governments have nice, clean ways of doing that, but the scope has to be really clear.
Right.
So we need
Yeah.
to talk through that with an attorney who tell us what the best practices are for this sort of construction project, which is not the first time a government has done a construction project.
Yep.
But I think that's why the whole governance piece of this thing is super important too.
Yeah. And just think about the other thing, which ones of these are something you have an interest in and would like to be on the committee or lead. So if there's a certain element of this, you're like, hey, I want to be a part of that piece. It would be good to everybody to kind of voice that at the meeting, so we know where everybody stands and we have some representation for each one of the groups.
And again, this could include, you know, getting the alternates involved as well.
Correct.
And there's nothing to say that we can't reach out into the community and get additional help if we need it. It's up to us to decide what we want to do.
All right, that was the list. So,
I've got one,
okay,
on tomorrow. No, it's Wednesday. At 3:00, we've got a meeting here. And I don't know their last names, but Caitlin and Dan from Merkley's office.
oh, yeah.
And I'm gonna be giving him a presentation
Yeah.
and a kind of drive-by on the bridge. Right now, I'm the only one there, so if one of you guys would like to participate, 3:00.
I think I'm good though.
3:00 to probably 4:30 is my guess. And we've got a little scandal sheet that we put together to walk. them
Yeah,
through.
if you email me the details, I'm free that afternoon.
3:00, but I'll send it to you, 3 to 4:30, right here.
All right, anything else from anyone?
Perfect timing. Well done.
We good?
Anybody? Marla, you're okay?
I am good. Thanks.
All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, Mike.
All
Good
right,
job.
thank you.
Thank you all.
And the port says thank you to everybody that served on this committee. It's meant a lot. And I've only been here a few months and I know it's meant a lot.
You